orthomarketing.com. 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.
Hello, everybody in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman, President of Ortho Marketing, and we are back with another podcast for you. Hope everybody is happy and healthy. It is April 1st, 2021, and spring is in the air. Baseball is in the air. And if you're a baseball fan or a Mets fan, let's go Mets. So very stoked today to have a very special guest with me. I have Simon Beylin with me. And Simon Beylin, it's got an interesting story. Simon is a dentist as well as the owner of Beylin Builders. How are you today, Simon?
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for joining. All right, so we're going to jump into it. So tell us, who is Simon Beylin?
So interesting. I'm the son of an electrician, and my mom was in the healthcare field. So that kind of took me towards both fields that I'm involved with now. So I went to dental school, became a dentist, became an endodontist. And then while we're in Massachusetts, my wife and I went through the process of building our first office, and that led me to opening Beylin Builders, which we specialize in medical and dental construction. We do a little bit of veterinary as well, but it's been a great experience.
So let's ask the number one question is why? You go to dental school, you're practicing a dentist. Sure, this could be a hobby, but what made you decide to, okay, I'm going to do two businesses now, and especially one completely opposite the other? A, what made you decide to take such a leap? And B, how do you divide your time up? Are you still practicing dentist, or is this a full-time, or why don't you talk a little about
Sure.
that
So I do still see patients a day and a half to 2 days a week. The why is very interesting. So endodontics does get very stressful. So it's definitely construction's stress relief compared to seeing root canal patients 5 days a week. But also, I grew up around my father's construction company, and that was in California. So when we moved to the East Coast and went through the process of building our first office, we quickly learned that construction on East Coast versus West Coast was very different. Timelines weren't adhered to. Working with contractors seemed to be a little bit difficult, and we were going through a growth phase and just wanted to have control over the construction of our own offices and our own destiny. So the main point was just to build our own office, our pediatric dental and orthodontic offices. But as we started building offices, the architects that we were working with enjoyed the product that we were producing and started referring outside doctors for us to build offices for. And it all kind of snowballed. So it went from 6 days of practice to 3 days to 2 days to a day and a half. And most of my time now is actually spent on the construction side. So it's a great feeling to be able to provide a doctor the office of their dreams when we get through the process.
That's great. Great story. It's interesting to follow your passion. Life's too short, so you have the ability to do what two things that you probably love to do. Obviously, they're both in your blood there, and you wouldn't have gone to dental school and done all that if you didn't, and still be doing it if you didn't love it. But the fact that you could, build. I mean, I can't even put a nail in. So the fact that you could do that is pretty remarkable. So now let's talk about the construction renovation of dental offices. So now we're in 2021, and there hasn't been a practice in the last year that hasn't completely changed something in their office. All right, you have to separate people, you have to put plastics up and whatever. So how has COVID affected practices, and how have you adapted your design strategies or construction to COVID? Because obviously prior to 2020, I'm sure you had a modality or methodology of we could build you whatever you want, but now you're kind of limited to a certain degree because of this crazy world we're in now. So how has your strategies and adaptations changed through
it's very interesting that you say that. So if you look 2 years ago, every blueprint that came across our desk for pediatric or orthodontic offices, we worked in open bays. That was normal. That's the way that we worked. I haven't seen pediatric or orthodontic set of blueprints that doesn't have most of the rooms as closed ops now since COVID started. So I think that may be getting a little bit aggressive. We're eventually going to have COVID under control. Does that mean you need to give up your open bays? that's still up in the air. In Massachusetts, when they allowed us to reopen our offices, we were only allowed to have one patient per open bay. And for example, we have two separate open bays in one of our offices and two private rooms in that office. So it went from seeing 8 patients at a time to now you can only see 4. So we went through that challenge by installing smart glass between the open bays. So it's a neat item. It's a glass panel, but you hit a button and it goes from opaque to see-through. It's neat. So and provides a barrier between the operatories. We've also installed UV systems on almost every single office that we're building now in the HVAC systems. So it's killing bugs and viruses as the air is being purified. Another thing for the pediatric offices and orthodontic offices that we've seen is even in our personal offices, we had iPad bars in all of our offices, and they're not allowed anymore. No magazines in the waiting rooms, no more iPads. So we've gone beyond that and installed something called Beam. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a projector that mounts in the ceiling and it projects an interactive game onto the floor in the waiting room. And the kids play with their feet, but they're not touching each other and they're not touching anything. So
cool.
it's been great. The response that we've gotten from it was amazing. We installed it in one office,
Right.
and now we're installing it in our second office, and now we're installing it for our clients as well. So we worked through everything that's come up, and it's working. We've always had ISO-Light and ISO-Dry in our operatories to help with aerosols. We used it before because it was just an extra set of hands, but now we're installing those almost in every office that we're building because doctors are concerned about the aerosols.
So obviously, every practice had to adapt very quickly during last March, April, May in order to change their layout, put up the plastic, put up walls. So everybody was scrambling, and I'm sure a lot of practices are not happy with the results, but they had no choice. So now that we see a semi bit of a light at the end of this tunnel here, what should a practice be doing? Should they be keeping it as is right now? Should they be kind of doing a hybrid approach? Because more people are still freaked out. I still am, and I don't potentially like to go out as much as I used to because of this whole thing. And with virtual orthodontics, virtual dental care, it's been a boom for a lot of our clients from people being able to do consults without even coming into the office now. But obviously, they do need to come in especially an orthodontist, they need to come in for their scans and for their exam. So, with that said, how are you suggesting, or what are you seeing of people adapting? Because they as I said, they scrambled. They just put something up because they had to stay alive and to keep patients coming in and to keep the practice alive. So now, what are you seeing in a year later that you're recommending people to do, or you're doing to kind of make it work as I said, either a hybrid or one way or the other? Because you can't keep changing your office every year or so, or every 6 months due to what's going on in the world. So what do you
So
suggest?
we have our own in-house millwork shop. So when COVID hit, we turned the machines from making cabinets to making barriers. And at first, as you mentioned, everybody was scrambling. So we made temporary barriers for as many offices as we could locally. And now we're converting some of those into something a little bit more permanent and more aesthetic. But I don't see those going away anytime soon. I think the patients still like that safety, the feeling of the safety that barriers provide. But we're not doing anything permanent. So a lot of the offices that we're building, you have nice millwork in the reception areas. So to add things that are going to be permanent, when I really feel, give it another six months to a year, we're going to be taking most of this down. I think that might be a mistake. But we're just making it look aesthetic, keeping the patients feeling as safe as possible, and keeping the offices open. So um, right now, acrylic barriers, especially at reception, are a hot commodity.
So, how are you learning what's trending and what needs to be done? You have to be certified? Are you taking any courses? Like, what keeps you up to breast on what needs to be done in an office as far as new platforms, what to take in, what to put out? There are new changes. I'm sure air purifier system from 2 years ago it's antiquated compared to what's out there now. So, how are you keeping up to snuff on what's going on? And how do you vet these
So
things too?
we are involved in several groups that are with healthcare construction. I think at first, when we started hearing about negative air purification and hospital, operating room type air purification for operatories, that was just very aggressive because nobody knew exactly what was going on. The states and the CDC are putting out a lot of different guidelines of what's required. And at this point, they've cut back in regards to what's actually required. But we are looking at different states. And a lot of what's being driven right now, I think, is being driven by fear. So when a doctor does say, "Oh, I want negative air purification in all my operatories," and you try to advise them that might be a little bit too aggressive, and here are the costs. Let's look at something that might make a little bit more sense because this is not going to stay around forever. I think we all get back onto the same page and find a nice workaround for what's going to resolve the issue today.
Okay. So obviously there's scuttlebutt out there. So what myths would you debunk right now as far as construction and COVID and dental orthodontic offices? What are people, when you say something and they're like, no, 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 we can't do that. What myth is out there that they're not educated about or just completely wrong about?
So I think a couple myths that we have in regards to building new offices, for example, are that it never runs on time and that you should expect change orders. It's never going to run on budget. So I think those are two myths that should be debunked. So if you have a proper design team and architect and your equipment and construction team are all tied in together from the beginning and you've worked with a team that has built dental offices before, there's no reason you shouldn't stay on time and on budget. So
Okay.
Robin Sharma has a quote: "Everything's built twice, first in the mind and then in reality." So if we follow that quote and you have a design and architect firm that you're working with, when they present the design to you, I mean, we present that in 4K type drawing renderings. You can walk through the space in a 3D walkthrough and know exactly what to expect before you ever pick up the hammer and nail. So if you're not changing things during the design, there's no reason that you should run above on costs, change orders, or timelines. So we've delivered all of our projects on time and on budget. And if we're building exactly what's on the plan and nothing's asked beyond what's on the plan, there shouldn't be any change orders. So
How often does that happen?
honestly, we've never presented a change order that wasn't something that the doctor asked for. So
That's
we have presented on our current project a couple change orders in the negative direction, which is always nice for the doc. So, if you
Sure.
have some
Right.
outlets that are not necessary because you're not going to use a piece of equipment anymore, we'll give that as a negative change order. But stay on time, stay on budget. You'll hear horror stories about that, but you shouldn't believe that. It's get yourself an excellent architect and design firm. We've worked with Joe Architect on almost every single project that we've built. I think they've done about 400 dental and medical offices at this point, mostly in the orthodontic pediatric space. They're an amazing team to work with. And what's interesting is we've seen blueprints come across our desk where we have a 4-page set of blueprints. And then we get a blueprint set from Joe Architect and it's getting close to 70 pages. And I'll have my subcontractors say, why are they so detailed? Why is this plan so detailed? And I look at that as you have a chef that gave you a perfect recipe. If you follow that recipe with all that detail there, we shouldn't have any questions along the project and we should never veer from that recipe. And that's always the way it's been. And the better subcontractors and better contractors will understand that level of detail is there for a reason. It makes the project smooth for everybody.
So let's talk about a typical project. Why don't you walk us through, because we're actually, we're pretty busy now. We're working with clients that are brand new startups or from building a practice up. So why don't you walk us through the steps involved in building a practice from, the initial design, initial vision to when they start seeing patients? How
Of
does all
course.
that
So
work?
it's interesting the way we're seeing it, a little bit of a transition. Most of by the time we would get a set of blueprints, it was coming from an architect or from a dental supply company, and the blueprints are here and we're ready to go. A lot of doctors and dentists now, they're reaching out to IT professionals as a first step because they know what they want for their technology for their office, and then it's going down the line. So we're seeing a little bit of a shift there, which is interesting. But you should go from your initial vision to establishing your team. And we can go through what that team consists of, but your team needs to be in place. And at that point, with everybody on your team, from your architect, your designer, your lending team, your contractor, your equipment people, you need to establish a budget. So we need to know what this project is going to cost and what we can afford. Once we're through that budget phase, we're going to start with our lending and financing solutions. So if you're lucky enough to be able to do this in cash, great. Just set that cash aside. If not, where are you going to get your lending and your financing sources? And we help our clients with that. And this is an interesting area because the banks want a detailed business plan, which we do for our clients. And in that detailed business plan, they want to know exactly what it's going to cost to build that site. Even though at this point, in reality, you should not have that site chosen yet because you don't know what you're approved for. You should have that final lending in place before you get to the lease portion or next phase. So from lending, we go through our lease and purchase negotiation, and we have heard some horror stories, and we go through that later if you'd like. But you need to have a lease or purchase negotiated before you go on to the next step, which is going to be your city and town preliminary approvals. So if you're going to build a 12-chair office and then you finish with construction, you've gone through everything, and now you tell the city that you have a 12-chair office, and they say, well, the municipalities will only handle a 4-chair office. They can limit the amount of patients you can see. So you have to have preliminary approvals from the town before you go on to the next step, which would be completing your lease and purchase. Then you're going to go through your design with your architect and with your equipment specialist. And then you go into the bidding process with your contractors and move on to opening day. So one thing we missed through all this mix that we just went through is, where does Dean fall in? And where does marketing come in? So a lot of clients that we work with don't really think about that until we're getting towards the finish line. So now we're really pushing them, even from day one, before we start construction. What are you doing with your marketing? That should be about 6 months prior to opening. You should have a marketing plan. You should have your website design in place. Think about logos. Thinking about an entire plan and getting on with an excellent marketing team well before you're open. You don't want to open the office and then think, how are we going to fill it with patients? With my personal offices, we do that about 6 months prior. And when we open our first days, we have patients in the office that are ready to see us. So it's important to have marketing throughout the entire process at the back of your mind and brought to the forefront before opening day.
Right on. I mean, same thing. We put together a plan, just like when you do construction. There has to be, steps involved. From design to filings to build outs to finishings, et cetera. And the same thing with a marketing program. We plan it out from coming up with the brand to how soon before the practice opens the website be launched to from a new practice to what you need at the beginning, moving forward every several months. You have to adapt and come up with the right strategy in place, and same thing there. So when it comes to coming up with an actual design, or finished product, is that what's the main onus? Is it on the designer or architect? Is it on you? You just or hand the plans and say, okay, build it, or do you get involved with the creation design part of it, or they just say, here you go, that's what we want, make it.
Great question. So hopefully the doc has some sort of vision of what he or she wants. And this happens one of two ways. So typically we see it depends on who they spoke to first. So if they've reached out to their equipment supplier, many times the equipment supplier will provide a set of blueprints for the space. These are very basic blueprints with the equipment in place, and then you'll find an architect that'll sign those blueprints. You'll have somebody on a design team, but then you're putting many different players from different teams together. What we like to see is working with an architect that has designers in-house. So you'll have a questionnaire. We have our own questionnaires that we send out, and then the architect will also send out a questionnaire. How many ops you're looking for, what type of configuration, whether it's open bays, closed rooms, what type of equipment you'd like. It's a very detailed set of questions that help them build the vision that the doctor would like. And from that, there will be several design meetings. So a few of them will occur over Zoom. And with the architect that we've worked with, as I mentioned, with Joe Architect, we fly out to Colorado. They'll set up a design room. We'll go through all the finishes in that room. And you see an exact design of what the office is going to be in a drawing form, video walkthrough before we go on any further. At that point, if everything's approved, you go on to blueprints. And once we have the blueprints, we kind of stick to that. We don't try to interject any different designs at that point, because then you're talking about change orders or changing what the client's already decided with their design team. And we try to stay away from that.
Does it come in as far as when somebody's building an office? Obviously, how do they kind of even figure out how much this is going to cost? Do they have to interview the architect and get their price, and then the designer their price, and then come to you, and based upon these designs, you give them the price? And what determines the price? How do you figure out what it is? Is it time materials? Is it creative? Like, how does that
Sure.
work too?
So again, it depends on where you start. So while Joe Architect, for example, has they can do just architect and design for you, and then present you with a set of blueprints, and then you find a local architect that would sign off on those and present them to the town. They also have two different packages that they work with, where they can actually bid the contractors for you, and they would be your construction managers. So they do that from architect all the way through delivery phase. And we also do that for our clients. If they come to us first, we'll find them an architect and designer that we'll work with and take them through the entire phase. But what drives cost is what you start with and what you want to finish with. So let's go with what you start with. So an ideal space versus an ideal referral source, for example. Our first office was an ideal space. It was in a medical building, an easy demolition process, no constrictions whatsoever. It was also an ideal referral source. We're a pediatric and orthodontic office. We're on the 5th floor, and the 3rd floor has a pediatrician. So they send the patients right upstairs, and we're able to take care of their patients. Our second office was an ideal space, but not ideal for construction. It was ideal because the top floor of the building is the largest pediatrician in the town, and we took over the entire bottom floor. But we had space constrictions. We had to lower floors. A lot of costs were involved just to get to the point where you can start construction. So you have your vanilla box, is what we call it. It could be a new building where just 4 exterior walls are built. You go in and you start construction right away. So if you're in a space like that, there's no cost for demolition. There's no extra engineering to work around low ceilings or anything of that sort. Other factors that will drive costs are where you're building. So if you're slab on grade, so you're on concrete on the 1st floor versus having a basement below or being on a 2nd or 3rd floor. So with dentists, the amount of plumbing and electrical that we put into the floors for our chairs and our deliveries is tremendous. So if you're a slab on grade, we're doing an oral surgeon office like that right now. The amount of trenching and cutting and putting things into the floor before you can even start building out of the floor is tremendous versus the cost of being on the 2nd floor or having a basement below. So that definitely drives costs up. And then finishes. Finishes is really going to take your costs to a different level. If you have very basic, just walls, nothing, no details in the ceilings, and laminate at the reception area, your costs are going to be much lower than having quartz and granite and nice finishes and different fixtures and lights. So design has a lot to do with it. But this is one of those first questions when we're asking about budget. Where do you want that budget to be? And then we can tell you what finishes you can have within that budget. And then we look at the space constrictions as well.
Interesting. What percentage of the practices that you build out you completely disagree with the design and layout, but you're hired to do it, and you got to be the good soldier and say, okay, we'll do it? Do you suggest, or do you just say, okay, because sometimes people are adamant, and well, it depends on each relationship or each particular project, or how do you do it? Because sometimes I have to bite my tongue with the client, because they just say I want to do this, and I could lead the horse to water and recommend them not to do it, but they say they want to do it, and then okay, but I'm not responsible.
Yeah,
How do you do it?
that's actually we want to bite our tongues as much as possible if we get into a situation like that. But for dentistry, that makes
Right.
it difficult. If a chair is not placed correctly, that's going to be a pain in the provider's back for their entire time in that office. Changing, especially if you're slab on grade, for example, changing a chair position or design is very easy on paper. Once that concrete is poured and those pipes are where they're supposed to be, changing chair locations is very difficult. So we are a little bit vocal in terms of design if we see something that's drastically off. We don't see that with firms that have done a tremendous amount of dental offices. On the other hand, when you deal with a set of blueprints from a dental supplier, they're great, but you're not paying for those. That's kind of included as a service when you're purchasing the equipment. So if those blueprints then go to a local design firm, and with that design firm, they have in-house architecture, that's great. If they've worked with dental offices and dentists before, they can say, okay, this is where the chair should be, because the dental suppliers are placing it kind of in a position of where it should be, but they're not giving you exact measurements of where everything should be. But we're actually we do consulting as well, construction consulting, if there are projects that are a little bit out of our reach, but the doctor still wants to work with us. And we're working on one right now where it was a dental supplier that provided drawings, which look great, but there are no mechanical and no drawings beyond that. I don't know how they're getting away with that with the town, um, but we have full size templates, for example, for all the deliveries, for all the chairs. We place everything in the operatories. We bring a dental chair so the dentist can sit there and make sure everything works, everything fits before we button up the floor. And this particular contractor that we're working with on this project has never built a dental office before, and it was a surprise to him that that's going to be difficult to change afterwards. Or let's just put it here and let's leave a long extension cord. So certain things that we try, we won't bite our lip on that. We'll make sure that those items are addressed before it goes into final construction.
Interesting. So, Simon, so if you had to give one bit of advice to somebody that is going to be opening a practice, um, how soon before they want to open should they start looking, and what advice would you give them as far as, okay, I just graduated dental school, or I just moved into an area, and I want to blah blah blah, or I want to expand. Um, so what advice would you give them as far as how soon to start beforehand, and then what advice would you give them in general?
So first off, there are great courses on how to open a dental office. So either work with somebody in that space that has done it before and can provide advice along the way, which I try to do with all of my doctors. We've built our own offices. We've had our own successful offices, my wife and I. Um, Before we opened our first office, we did take breakaway seminars. It's a Scott Loon course, and he teaches opening a dental office from vision all the way through opening day. And while it's geared mainly towards general dentists, there were enough pearls of wisdom gathered there that we were able to apply towards our office. Because if you're fresh out of school or you've been associate for a year or two, you've never submitted a claim form to an insurance company. You've never done 90% of the back end office of dentistry, which day one in your own office, you're going to have to do that. I remember day one in our office, we realized we didn't have a patient intake form um, day one. So you don't think about all these things because you're so nervous about getting construction right, getting the look of the office right, pleasing your patients, some of the things you forget about. So we did take that course. I highly recommend it. Also, you have to have your team in place. That starts with hopefully your accountant. If you've been an associate for a little while, you should have an accountant. You will absolutely need an attorney to review documents, starting with your purchase, your lease, through your construction documents, your architectural documents. You have to have a great lending team. We've worked with Live Oak, we've worked with Wells Fargo, we've worked with Bank of America. Several of these banks have dental specific programs or are dental specific. So while local banks might seem nice, they may not understand why you just graduated dental school and you have $800,000 in student loans, where um, Live Oak or Bank of America's dental division completely understand that, and that's not factored into your lending. So that's a way to go. I don't think you're going to save anything by using local banks, but there are also local banks that do understand dentists, and they're fine with those high student loan numbers that we now have. From there, you have to have an excellent design and architectural firm. And while you're working with them, you need to have your equipment lender, your equipment provider in place. So whether that's Benco, Shine, Patterson, whoever you want to use, you have to have a team member there that you're happy with and that you want to work with. You're going to work with them hand in hand through the entire process, and they're there to make sure that your constructions, in terms of your equipment, is done correctly. Your chairs are placed where they should be, um, from their construction. So find a construction team that has built dental and medical offices. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to find somebody who's done additions on homes and residential, and I'm going to save a little bit of money because they're not commercial contractors. And we've seen that not go so well. There are a lot of differences in the construction of medical and dental spaces that typical residential contractors just they don't know enough about it. Um, Definitely, your IT team needs to be in place. Everything now, nobody's using paper charts anymore. So IT needs to be in place from
Right.
the beginning. And then you should have a marketing and consulting team as well. So that's towards even at the beginning of the project, your marketing team can help you with demographics and tell you where you're opening your office. So working that a little bit backwards rather than finding a place and then figuring out how to market it, ask your marketing team to help you with demographics to find the perfect location to open your office. Um, and beyond that, you should have insurance in place and investing for the future. And last but not least, we say happy wife, happy life, or happy spouse, peaceful house, whichever method you want to use there. You have to make sure that whoever is at home is on the same page as you. It's going to be a stressful process no matter who you're working with. It's going to be new if this is your first office. There's going to be a lot of back and forth. I mean, the hundreds of emails that go back and forth for choosing finishes, approving cabinets, for example. You will be busy with all that on top of your normal day-to-day seeing patients if you're an associate at the time. So just ensure whoever's at home, whoever's on your team with you, knows that it's going to be a little bit stressful for that 16-week construction period and 16 weeks prior to that during the planning period. So,
Buckle
yeah,
down. Exactly. So, ask you just a couple more questions, and Simon. So, question one. So, what do you use as far as keeping up to date with anything as far as educating yourself? What's your go-to? It doesn't have to be about business. It could be personal, whatever. But do you have a blog you go to, or a book you read, or a podcast you listen to that just is good, gives you a mental workout? What do you do from something that motivates you, or something that you educates you? It could be, as I said, for business wise, it could be personal wise, it could be because you run several businesses. You seem like you got your stuff together. So, is there any particular blog, book, newsletter, podcast, something that you could recommend to listeners for them to
of course.
get a hold of?
So we're quite a bit involved in different construction groups on LinkedIn. So we follow several different contractors who build medical and dental spaces on LinkedIn. I think it's a great source to find a great construction team in your area that's performed medical and dental construction. So we do trade secrets amongst our group. So that keeps us on top of the changes. I mean, everything kind of trickles down from medicine to what's required to building a medical facility. Then it slowly trickles into the dental space. And it's nice to follow the people who are a couple steps ahead to know what we should expect a couple years behind. In terms of podcasts, I listen to yours. Um, I
Thank
definitely,
you.
yeah.
Good answer.
Marketing is it's crucial. I was always a firm believer if I'm going to spend $1 on marketing and it's going to bring me $10 back in my investment, it's worth every dollar I put into marketing. So I keep up a lot in terms of dental marketing. That's kind of what I do for our practices. And on top of construction, it's kind of my little hobby. I want to know what works for different offices. I want to know what works in different areas. And we try to implement those for our office as well. Um,
Great. Got
sure.
2 more questions. Number one. All right. So you just saw come across your phone that an asteroid is hitting Earth tomorrow.
I hope not.
Okay. You run into the supermarket. What's the
What's
last
the
meal?
last meal? Great question. Huh. My wife and I went vegan a few years ago. So actually, it's
Really?
2000.
So are you going for
Yeah.
steak?
I don't know. I think I would still feel bad about that steak. But I'll tell you what, the vegan options. We became vegan in 2013, so it's been more than a few years. But I don't know, the chocolate mousse that they have now. You couldn't tell that it's not real chocolate mousse anymore. So that's definitely at the top of my list.
Okay. So your last meal was
Yeah.
chocolate mousse. Okay. All right. That's cool. All right. And last question after that is Hershey bar, Reese's
Reese's
peanut butter
peanut butter
cup.
cup. Absolutely.
There you go. All right. It's like 98%
Oh,
of
really?
people choose that, which is great. Yeah, it's funny. All right. So if somebody wants to get more information, learn more about you, Simon, what's the best way for
So
them
we've
to do
just
so?
launched our new website. It's funny. Our original name was Oracle Construction and Development, and I actually chose it was supposed to be OCD Construction because my father was a little OCD, never diagnosed, and so am I. I absolutely like everything to be perfect when we're providing the product that we provide for our clients. So I chose OCD Builders, and then I chose the words that went for the O, the C, and the D. And Oracle was one of the words. And then we get a letter from Oracle, the um, software
Stop.
company. Please stop using Oracle
That's it.
because we have development as part of our software. So we changed it to Beylin Builders, and I changed that as my brother came
Okay.
on. So my brother's full time with the company now as well. So he does a lot of our construction and project management, and he's also a pilot, so he's extended the reach. We were
Oh, nice.
just in New
Interesting.
England, and now
Okay.
we're looking at projects all the way down to Florida this year. So it's expanded our
Hmm.
reach. But
Okay.
BeylinBuilders.com is our new website, and that'll have
Okay.
links to our LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram.
Terrific. Excellent. Simon, thank you so much. This was great. Very interesting, guys. If you are building, thinking of expanding your office, renovating, or building a new one, reach out to Simon. He knows his stuff because obviously, besides being the builder, he's also a dentist, so he knows the best way to use it there as well. So, Simon, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again. And guys, take a look at his website. Beylin Builders, you'll be impressed, and he's somebody you highly recommend. So, with that said, everybody, please be safe, be happy, enjoy the spring, upcoming summer, and once again, if as the great Jerry Garcia said, nothing left to do but smile, smile,
Thank you so
smile.
much.
Okay, bye bye.
OrthoMarketing.com. 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.